let me say this right off the bat. I would much rather see Dillian Whyte fight Luis Ortiz on December 22nd than Dillian Whyte fight Dereck Chisora in a rematch. Yeah, I'd much rather see Whyte versus Ortiz than Whyte versus Chisora 2. And I've said that from day one. My argument has never been that I would rather see Chisora Whyte 2 than Whyte versus Ortiz. That's never been my argument. I've never sat here and tried to tell you that Whyte Chisora 2 is a better fight than Whyte Ortiz. No. I would rather see Dillian Whyte fight Ortiz or Big Baby Miller or even Dominic Breazeale on December 22nd rather than Dereck Chisora. I've always said this. But what you have to understand is my view and what I want is not representative of what the majority of the British public want. Dillian Whyte has reached the stage in his career now where he is a pay-per-view fighter. He is headlining his own pay-per-view shows. His profile started to grow off the back of his gallant performance against Anthony Joshua, because Joshua was a star in the making then. And Dillian Whyte gained a following off the back of his gallant performance and his tremendous fight against Anthony Joshua. And his profile in the UK has steadily risen since then. And it's finally reached a point where he's become a pay-per-view fighter in his own right, following the tremendous first fight he had with Dereck Chisora on an Anthony Joshua undercard, and that was the fight of the night. So a lot of casuals, because it's majority casuals who buy Anthony Joshua pay-per-views. Yeah, of course, there are some of us hardcore boxing fans who buy Anthony Joshua pay-per-views, but the majority of people buying Anthony Joshua pay-per-views are casuals. These are people who watch boxing a handful of times a year, not the boxing nerds like me and you who watch boxing every weekend and talk about boxing every flipping day. No. Majority of people who buy Anthony Joshua pay-per-views are casuals. The vast majority. They watch boxing a handful of times a year and they get their boxing news from Sky Sports and they really don't know any other boxers apart from a couple big names like Mayweather, Conor McGregor, even though he's not a boxer. And they might know Dillian Whyte, Chisora, David Haye. These are the names they know. And outside of the big names, they're not really interested in watching boxing. So, Dillian Whyte has built his profile off the back of the Anthony Joshua performance. Then the Dereck Chisora fight. Then the highlight reel knockout over Lucas Brown. And then finally, with the Joseph Parker fight, his first ever fight where he was the headline pay-per-view act, because obviously his fight against Joshua was pay-per-view, but he was the opponent then, whereas against Parker, he was the A-side, so to speak. I know it was a 50-50 split apparently, but you know what I'm saying. It was Dillian Whyte's pay-per-view in the UK, headlining at the O2. And Parker was known to the UK public because he just come off a fight against Anthony Joshua where they filled out a stadium with like 80,000 people and broke the UK pay-per-view record. So, I believe it was anyway. If it wasn't, it was like the second highest UK pay-per-view. So, Whyte's profile is very high at this point. I mean, not anywhere near an Anthony Joshua, but it's high. Now, if you look at Dereck Chisora's profile, his profile is also high. Dillian Whyte has got 174,000 Twitter followers. Dereck Chisora's got nearly 200,000 Twitter followers. Dereck Chisora's profile has been built in the UK over a number of years. He first shot to fame, I guess, in the UK. It's not like Dereck Chisora's a household name in the UK. He's not. It's not like Dillian Whyte's a household name in the UK either. But they are names familiar to a lot of casual boxing fans. Let's just put it that way, okay? Because of as I've mentioned, Dillian Whyte's associations with Joshua, etc. And when it comes to Dereck Chisora, a lot of casuals know him because of not only his fight with David Haye, but the brawl that he had with David Haye in Germany at a press conference, which went viral. That went viral all over the internet in the UK and worldwide. And it went viral in the UK press, and it was on the front page of newspapers and all that kind of business. Because David Haye was the most well-known British boxer at the time. David Haye was a household name in the UK, still is a household name in the UK. And so Dereck Chisora really shot to prominence then in terms of his profile. For the wrong reasons, you might say, but still. Then he had the fight against David Haye. The David Haye-Dereck Chisora fight was in a stadium. Yeah, in a stadium. Upton Park in West Ham. And it was a very good fight, which ended in a spectacular knockout. Unfortunate for Dereck Chisora because he was on the receiving end. But still, that gained him a lot of recognition. The whole situation with David Haye went viral. Then Dereck Chisora had the fight against Dillian Whyte on an Anthony Joshua undercard. It stole the show that night. It was the fight of the night. There was hundreds of thousands of casual boxing fans tuning in to watch the Joshua fight. And they saw Whyte versus Chisora on the undercard, and they remembered those two guys. Okay? So where am I going with this? I'm trying to show you that right now, the Dereck Chisora fight is the biggest fight for Dillian Whyte outside of a title shot financially in the UK. It is. What Eddie Hearn has been saying about the Chisora fight being bigger than Luis Ortiz and Brazil, the only person who might be able to, match Chisora as an opponent for Whyte commercially might be Miller if they were given enough time to sell the fight, like let's say 3-4 months to sell it. Whyte versus Miller might be able to do the numbers that Whyte versus Chisora could do, because Miller is a very good talker. He talks a lot of trash. He's controversial. He's a very confrontational character, just like Dillian Whyte. So there's chemistry there for beef. There's chemistry there for memorable sound bites that could go viral. You understand? Because of that, there's the potential that Whyte versus Miller commercially could do it as well as Whyte versus Chisora too. Potentially, okay? They'll have to work very hard to get it to that level, because Miller don't have the history with Whyte that Chisora has with Whyte. With all the table throwing and all that type of business. Miller isn't as known, anywhere near as known to the UK public as Dereck Chisora is. But because his gift of the gab and his confrontational personality, he might have a chance of matching Dereck Chisora as an opponent for Whyte in terms of market value for that fight. But other than that, none of the contenders, other than, you might be able to get somebody like a Povetkin maybe, but he's coming off a loss. But none of the available contenders for December 22nd are as commercially lucrative as Dereck Chisora is to fight Dillian Whyte. That's the reality of it. Yeah? So for people to be acting as though Luis Ortiz, a man who's only got 15,000 Twitter followers, is somehow just as commercially viable as a Dereck Chisora to fight Dillian Whyte, I don't know what type of crap people are smoking when they think Ortiz can sell as many tickets as Chisora against Dillian Whyte. What are you talking about? Ortiz, nobody knows him in the UK apart from us boxing nerds. Other than that, nobody knows this man. He can't speak a word of English. How are those press conferences going to go? Man don't speak English. He's got no history with Dillian Whyte in terms of, meeting him face to face and any kind of beef. No. But yet you're telling me this fight can sell just as well as Whyte Chisora 2. Sky, if the Whyte Chisora rematch gets made, they're going to be playing highlights from the first fight all over the place when it comes to the promotion of it. It's going to be all over the place, reminding us what a great fight it was, and they'll probably play a clip of the "Who Glassed Me" moment with Chisora and Hay. They won't show the actual fight because that was on Box Nation, but the "Who Glassed Me," they'll probably run that, The table flipping from the first Whyte Chisora fight, they'll show that. They've got loads of material to work with when it comes to promoting a Whyte Chisora rematch. Both guys don't like each other. Both guys love to talk trash. Dereck Chisora is a very strange, enigmatic, eccentric character. So, people, I don't know where people are going trying to act like Luis Ortiz is going to do just as good numbers against Dillian Whyte as Chisora would do. It's ridiculous. Dereck Chisora has got a much bigger following than Ortiz in the UK. Way bigger. It's like a couple of years ago when Mayweather fought McGregor. I mean, how long ago was it when Mayweather fought McGregor? Was it a couple of years ago? It probably was. I don't know. When you get to my age, years pass by so quickly. Let's just say it was a year ago or a couple of years ago. When Mayweather fought McGregor, if Mayweather had fought Errol Spence, which would have been a much better fight, would that have done the numbers that Mayweather McGregor would have done? Hell no. Hell no. So if you're talking about which was the bigger fight, which was the more lucrative fight, Mayweather McGregor was way bigger and way more lucrative than Mayweather versus Spence or Mayweather versus Keith Thurman. That's the reality. And although I'm not talking about fighters on the same level as a Mayweather or McGregor here, and commercially, it's a similar scenario where Dillian Whyte and Dereck Chisora have a similar, public profile in the UK in terms of the amount of people who know them. King Kong Ortiz, nobody knows this guy in the UK. I don't know why there are people from America trying to tell me about the British boxing scene. You never been to Britain. You don't know anything about the British boxing scene. You don't know who's popular and who's not popular in the UK. You got no idea. Your perception of what fights you think can sell in the UK is totally skewed and way off because you don't know nothing about the British boxing scene or Britain in general. All right, shout out to the American fans who are a bit more savvy. But most of these Wilder fanboys who are coming out saying, oh, the Ortiz fight is just as big and he'll do just as many pay. No, he won't. No, he won't. So what you're asking Dillian Whyte to do is to take a pay cut and fight a more dangerous opponent when he's on the brink of challenging for a world heavyweight title. That's what you're telling him to do. Take a pay cut, fight Ortiz when you're on the brink of fighting for a world heavyweight title. Just be honest about it. If that's what you wanted to do, which it is, be honest about it. Don't come out and start lying and talking rubbish and acting as though the Ortiz fight is just as big as the Chisora fight is financially, because that's just foolishness. It's a fight you want to see more, yeah. Mostly because these Wilder fans want to see Dillian Whyte get knocked out. That's why most of them want to see it. I want to see it because I think it's a very good fight and it's a fight we haven't seen before. It's an interesting match, clash of styles. And I would love to see Dillian Whyte versus Ortiz. Can I understand why Dillian Whyte might take a Chisora fight rather than an Ortiz fight? Of course I can understand it in the current circumstances. Yeah. He's on the brink of a world title shot. And he don't want to fight Ortiz unless it's a final eliminator. He's said that before. He'll fight Ortiz, he's happy to, as long as it is a final eliminator to face Wilder. Because Wilder sent Dillian Whyte a message saying, yo, I'm going to make you wait 2 years for your title shot. Dillian Whyte don't want to wait 2 years. So he said to the WBC, I will happily fight Ortiz if you make me the mandatory, or you make the winner of that fight the mandatory now, not the second mandatory who has to wait for Brazil to get his mandatory shot first and then wait a year after that to get their shot. No. If you allow the winner of Whyte Ortiz to get their mandatory shot before Brazil, then Dillian Whyte's happy to fight Ortiz. He said that from a long time. It's risk reward at this point. When you reach this level of boxing, and Dillian Whyte has taken a hell of a lot of risks in his career. Let's not pretend otherwise. Let's not pretend that it wasn't a massive risk for him to fight Joshua. When he didn't have a great camp, when he was having to travel around the world following Jonathan Banks, his trainer, just to get somebody to train him. When he was injured. When he'd been off 2.5 years and only come back with a couple fights against journeymen. Let's not act like that weren't a big risk. Let's not act like taking on Lucas Brown weren't a risk. Let's not act like taking on Joseph Parker weren't a risk. This guy's taken loads of risks in his career. I mean, even a Dereck Chisora rematch is a risk. Yeah. So many of you guys were saying that Dillian Whyte lost the first Chisora fight and that he's been ducking the rematch. And now all of a sudden, what? He wants to fight Chisora and everybody forgets about the fact that they said he was ducking Chisora. So the Chisora rematch is a risky fight for Dillian Whyte because the first fight was tough. That first fight could have gone either way. When I watched it live, I thought Chisora won the fight. By a point. When I watched it back a couple months later, I thought Dillian Whyte nicked it, but it was a fight that could have gone either way. It was very competitive. So what do you think the rematch is going to be? Another thing I forgot to mention, just hopping back a little bit, is Dereck Chisora's highlight reel knockout of Carlos Takam on Dillian Whyte's last show. Whyte against Parker. Great fight. And he had Chisora against Takam on the undercard. Another great fight. They're going to be playing those. Sky are going to be playing those highlight reels throughout the promotion of Whyte Chisora too. That is going to go a long way when it comes to hooking the casuals. Facts. As well as all the trash talk and table throwing and he glassed me and all that kind of business. Yeah. So, at the moment, it looks like Dillian Whyte is taking the risk because the Chisora rematch is still a risk. But it looks like he wants to take the risk, which comes with the biggest financial reward when he's on the brink of a heavyweight title shot anyway. And unless the WBC are going to make him versus Ortiz the #1 final eliminator, then he's not trying to entertain that fight right now, it would seem. What would you do in that position? Let me just ask you people out here who are running around saying Whyte is a coward and all this kind of... What would you do in Dillian Whyte's position? You guys sitting behind your keyboards. What would you do in Dillian Whyte's position? Would you take on a risk in Dereck Chisora, which comes with the biggest reward? Or would you take on an even bigger risk in Luis Ortiz, which comes with a smaller reward? And no guaranteed title shot for the next 18 months. What would you do? We're all warriors, huh? You'd all just take the big pay cut and take on Ortiz Well, you're not going to get a title shot for 18 months. Look, there's no way in hell that Dillian Whyte is afraid to get in the ring with Luis Ortiz as far as I'm concerned. No way. But is he being strategic about risk reward? I mean, if you want to say he's ducking Luis Ortiz at this point, I can accept that. Yeah, I can accept that. Because Ortiz has reached out and said, yo, I'll fight you December 22nd. And all of a sudden, you know, Dillian Whyte said he would fight Ortiz, but all of a sudden, that's gone out the window. So maybe Dillian Whyte was just using Luis Ortiz's name as a pawn in the negotiations with Dereck Chisora. He's trying to call Chisora's bluff, maybe, as I suggested in a previous video. So if you want to say he's ducking, look, as far as I'm concerned, a duck is a duck. Whether you duck somebody for financial reasons or you duck them because you're scared, whatever the case may be, a duck is a duck. I've always said this on my channel. But a guy, like, for example, when Tim Bradley ducked Amir Khan, Tim Bradley was going through some promotional stuff at the time. And he didn't want to take a big fight like the Khan fight with his then promoter. You really think Tim Bradley was scared of Amir Khan? Hell no. Tim Bradley's scared? Look at the people Bradley's fought. You weren't scared. But he made a business decision at the time. He had to duck the fight at the time for business reasons. And that's basically what Dillian Whyte is doing at this point, as far as I'm concerned. If he actually is ducking Luis Ortiz, is for business reasons. He's taking a different fight, which is still a risky fight, but it has a bigger reward financially. So, yeah, that's my take on it, people. Dillian Whyte is not the scared type, but he's business savvy. And, you know, I don't think Dillian Whyte gets enough credit for how business savvy he is. He's actually self-managed. Now, there are many fighters in boxing who are self-managed, but Dillian Whyte is a guy who's very street smart. That's something I noticed about him very early on in his career, is that he's taken that street smartness into boxing. You understand? He's not one of these street guys who's loose, mentally loose. Some people will understand what I'm saying. He's not loose. He's not foolish. He's not like an Adrian Broner, somebody like that. No, Dillian Whyte's not like that. He's sharp mentally, even though he's still got his Jamaican accent and sometimes his English can sound a little funny with, you know, fighting in Argos and all that type of business. But and Dereck Chisora rather than Chisora, even though he's got all that, don't let that fool you into thinking that he's not smart, because Dillian Whyte is a smart guy. Yeah. And I'm sure if you spoke to his promoter, Eddie Hearn, he'd tell you the same thing. Dillian Whyte, very smart. Not the kind of guy you can rip off. Not the kind of guy you can give a bad deal to just because you got lawyers and you went to a posh school and all this kind of stuff. Don't think that you can pull the wool over Dillian Whyte's eyes because you come from a more privileged upbringing. He's street smart, Dillian Whyte, you know. He's a smart guy, and he also knows boxing a lot. You know, from over the years, you go watch Dillian Whyte interviews, even from back in the days. This guy knows boxing, is a student of boxing. He watches boxing. And that's something I've been meaning to make a video about, actually, is a lot of fighters don't really watch boxing like that. You know that? A lot of fighters don't really watch. I'm telling you, so many fighters are barely above the level of a casual when it comes to the amount of boxing they watch. Obviously, they know a lot more about the sport than a casual, but what I'm saying is the amount of boxing they consume, right, watch other fighters, big fights, etc., the amount of boxing news they read pales in comparison to people like us, the boxing nerds, who talk about boxing day in, day out, 365. People, I've made boxing videos on Christmas Day. How about that? That's how much of a boxing nerd I am. Yeah. But there are a lot of these professional boxers, top level professional boxers. They don't follow the sport. They don't watch as many fights as guys like we. You understand? They don't. We are the boxing nerds. Let's just be real about what we are. We are not representative of the majority of boxing fans. The majority of people who are going to buy Dillian Whyte's pay-per-view on December 22nd are not people like us. Yeah? The majority of the people who are going to buy Dillian Whyte's pay-per-view on December 22nd have never heard of Luis Ortiz. And boy, they definitely, jeez. Look at Dominic Brazil here. Man's got 4,000 Twitter followers. He did fight Anthony Joshua, but it was a long time ago, and there was no real beef attached to that, and he's obviously not British, so the British fans have obviously not really remembered much about him. Man's only got 4,000 followers. That's crazy. Also shows you the difference between British boxing and American boxing, doesn't it? Because you got heavyweight contenders in America who have fought for heavyweight titles, and they've only got, 4,500 followers on Twitter. And this is a guy, Charles Martin, who held a world heavyweight title, and he's only got 7,000 Twitter followers. That's crazy. So me, just some random guy on the internet who makes YouTube videos about boxing, I've got more YouTube subscribers than Charles Martin, Dominic Brazil, and Luis Ortiz have got Twitter followers combined. Imagine that. That's crazy. I hope American boxing can dig itself up out of the grave. American heavyweight boxing can dig itself up out of the grave. Because that's a travesty. Back in the 70s, everybody knew who Ken Norton was. Everybody knew people like Jerry Quarry. In the UK, everybody knew who Henry Cooper was. Let me stick to American boxing, all right? The contenders, a lot of the time, were household names in the 70s in the heavyweight division in America. Even in the 90s, there was a lot of contenders who more casual American boxing fans knew about. But today, geez, man, you got a former heavyweight champion in Charles Martin. You got a heavyweight title challenger in Dominic Brazil, and nobody knows who these guys are. That's a sad story. I hope it... look at this. Joe Joyce. He's got more Twitter followers than the three guys I just mentioned combined as well. Jeez, people. Joe Joyce has only just turned pro. What's going on with heavyweight boxing in America? In fact, let me see Deontay, man. How many is... Deontay must have a lot of Twitter followers now because of the beef with Anthony Joshua. He must have a lot of Twitter followers, surely. I'm saying he's got at least 100,000. At least. Maybe 500,000. Let's see. Okay, 350,000. All right, that's a decent amount. It's a decent amount. And you can be sure that his Twitter numbers have probably more than doubled since his beef with Anthony Joshua. You can be sure of that. Because that's where Wilder's got most of his fame and profile from, is from keeping Anthony Joshua's name in his mouth. Let's just be real. That's what it is. And then he would have gained even more followers, obviously, with the Tyson Fury fight being announced, because Fury's got a decent amount of followers too. Now, don't anybody misconstrue what I'm trying to convey in this video as me saying, if you don't have Twitter followers, you don't count on this earth. No, Twitter and social media and all that business has got nothing to do with your worth as a human being. But it is a decent gauge of your commercial value. That's what it is, a decent gauge of your commercial value. I'm not saying it's always accurate 100% of the time in every instance, but generally it's a decent gauge of where you're at commercially. If you look at a public figure like a boxer their Twitter followers, you'll see where they're at, roughly where they're at in terms of their commercial value or their potential commercial value. Let me correct myself. Not their commercial value, but their potential commercial value. Because having Twitter followers is great, but you need to convert that into money. There are some people out there with loads of Twitter followers and they're not millionaires. All right? That has to be said, but still. Anyway, hopefully I got my point across in this video. Of course, I would rather see Dillian Whyte versus Luis Ortiz on December 22nd, but that it is not a commercially bigger fight than Whyte versus Chisora 2. And hey, if you want to think that Dillian Whyte is a coward and he's shaking in his boots and all this kind of stuff, I mean, go ahead. I think it's foolishness. I think you don't understand Dillian Whyte and the mentality of the guy and the way he's been throughout his career and who he's fought and his willingness to take risks. So to say he's scared, I mean, he called Ortiz out years ago anyway. He was trying to fight Ortiz a couple years back. But now all of a sudden, when Ortiz has been knocked out and he's much older, now Whyte is scared of him when Whyte has improved since them times. Like, people, please. Is Whyte looking at risk reward? Of course he is. Of course he is. And the Dereck Chisora fight is slightly lower risk, but still a risk, but a higher reward. That's what it's all about. So, and like I say, he's on the brink of a heavyweight title shot. So everything is risky at this point, innit? Let me know how you guys feel in the comment section below. It's happening. I'm out. Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.